I'm Rick Wade, Senior Vice President for Strategic Alliances and Outreach here at the United States Chamber of Commerce. A few years ago, we convened thousands of business leaders and policymakers and other stakeholders in a real dialogue about what we call equality of opportunity in America, recognizing that there are real barriers for people to realize their own American dream. From those conversations, we launched a very ambitious, broad, sweeping equality of opportunity initiative designed to advance both policies and private sector solutions to close the equality gaps in America. One of those critical domains or areas that we've been focusing on and working very hard across business and industry is in this area of second chance hiring. There's an estimated 70 million plus people in the United States who have an arrest or conviction record. 600,000 men and women across our country are released from jail each year. And we believe during this time that we say at the Chamber, there are millions of people without jobs and millions of jobs without people. There's a real talent shortage. And we believe that second and fair chance hiring initiatives offer benefits to individuals, employers, the communities, and our broader society. Tapping into this untapped talent pool is very critical, even to advancing our goals around diversity, equity, and inclusion in America. I'm delighted to have joining us this afternoon for a conversation about the criminal justice system in America, and more specifically, fair and second chance hiring and employment. Please join me in welcoming Nisha Anand, Chief Executive Officer of Dreamcorp. Nisha.
Hello.
Hi, Nisha. Thank you so much for joining us in this very important conversation.
Thank you for inviting me.
I attended just not too long ago the National Day of Empathy that was sponsored by this wonderful organization called Dreamcore. To level set, tell us about Dreamcore. What's the organization's mission? Tell us more about it.
Yes, I am very lucky to run Dreamcore. It's a national social justice nonprofit that was founded by Van Jones. And I started working there about 9 years ago. And in the last 9 years, we have seen dramatic changes in the amount of polarization and division in this country. And Dreamcore really wants to change that. We want to change the way people come together to solve tough problems. And we believe that everybody in America can play a role in that. So we focus on criminal justice reform, tech equity, and climate change. And we look for win-win-win solutions that can help bring the country together and solve these difficult problems.
I really love, I guess, sort of the opening part of your mission statement, if you will, closing prison doors and opening doors of opportunity. And that really is what this is about, right?
Exactly. On the nose.
But when you think of the sort of doors of opportunity, what are some of the, I guess, policy prescriptive changes or initiatives that you're working on? We too at the Chamber, through our Equality of Opportunity Initiative, we know that there's a role for the private sector directly, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But what are some of the policy opportunities that you all are working on that kind of help create those doors, open those doors of opportunity?
Absolutely. I think closing prison doors and opening doors of opportunity, those two things go together hand in hand. We have far too many people incarcerated that should not be in there. And so a lot of our legislative efforts focus at what we call de-incarceration. How do we get people home who really should be home? The truth is most sentences that are given here in the United States, people do come home. They're not life sentences. And so we want to focus on when people come home, they come home better, not bitter. They come home ready to make a difference and contribute and actually, do some amazing things when our folks finally come home. And right now, that's not what the system is geared towards. So a lot of our laws do focus, and the legislation we work on focus on getting people home, passing legislation that will make prisons more of a focus of rehabilitation and second chances, job skilling and upskilling, so that when folks come home, they can contribute. So we've been pretty excited to put forth some federal legislation and local legislation. And you're going to hear from one of our local staff members, Amanda Hall later, who's going to tell you more about ways you can get involved locally. But on the federal level, we passed something called the First Step Act, which brought home to date 20,000 people home. And we couldn't be more proud. But when folks come home, some of the real work starts. How do we open doors of opportunity? And one of the first pieces of legislation that I was introduced to was ban the box legislation. This idea that when you apply for a job, you have to check a box that says, I was convicted of X. And it's an easy way for employers to say, well, then you're not qualified. We won't look at you. We'll throw away your application. That's not what this country is supposed to be about. And especially if you've served your time, and a lot of us, there are a lot of folks inside who are serving time for things all of us have done in college, for instance, or other points in our lives. And that box follows them around forever. And even when we put out a piece of legislation that might get rid of the box, a lot of employers still have that box as well. So some simple things like that do fall in our portfolio of types of laws we like to get behind and pass to make it easier and to remove some of those barriers to employment for the folks coming home.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and I'm so happy that we are now moving beyond ban the box into creating and opening doors for opportunity. I was reading an article in New York Times back in August of 2021. Jamie Dimon, chair and CEO of JP Morgan Chase and Company, made a profound statement, just simply in the headline: if you paid your debt to society, you should be allowed to work. And you know that there's business leaders and major corporations and brands, the Second Chance Business Coalition, which includes some amazing both large and middle and small companies across America, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and our own research around the business case for second chance hiring. It's exciting to see the private sector step up.
Absolutely.
What can we before we get to what can we do more? How does Dreamcore partner with the private sector, with these companies and others?
Look, I believe that every single person in this country has a role to play to making the country better. I think that is what, at our highest aspiration, this country is supposed to be about. Not that we've achieved it yet, but we can. And I believe we can all play a role. So at Dreamcore, we do try to partner quite powerfully with anyone who wants to help make a difference. And so at Dreamcore, our initiative that works in tech equity, we've been able to partner with a lot of companies who do have that need to find more diverse talent. And I think in the business world, we've accepted, at least academically, how important it is to have diverse talent at every level of a company. That if you don't have someone on your team that can recognize your blind spots, you're going to come up with ideas and products that don't look at the blind spots. You could be missing a whole market opportunity if you don't have people representative of the communities that you're trying to work with. And so companies who recognize that call for diversity, they don't have a lot of help. I think, unfortunately, in the polarization that we're currently in, a lot of folks like to point fingers and say, this is what you're doing wrong, and look at your terrible numbers on diversity, that we have a lot more of that rather than let's help each other. You have areas we can learn from, and we at Dreamcore have areas you can learn from. And so our tech equity initiative will work directly with the company, find out what roles you're hiring for that are tech-based roles, digital sales, IT, basic programming, intro developers, and we will find the talent, train the talent, and put them directly into roles. And so we've been lucky with big partners like Target, Optum Healthcare, and recently we did a cohort with HubSpot that had all formerly incarcerated individuals, so second chance hiring, and they held open roles. All of these companies will hold the roles open until we can find, train, and then put into employment. So we're interested in partnerships like that, where it is, and I mentioned this before, a win-win-win. It's a win for Dreamcore. We're helping fulfill our mission. It's a win for the company. We're not just getting diverse talent. We're really working with the company in a holistic approach about how do you make sure you can get people in the door and then they can succeed, because that's another key piece of it. And it's a win for folks coming home and other people who are traditionally underrepresented in these fields, which are the good, clean, green paying jobs of the future. And we'd like to see more of our folks in those roles.
Yeah, you raise a good point, Nisha. You know what? And it's also a win for our country. I mean, we estimated in our report the business case for second chance hiring $78 billion to $87 billion.
Yeah.
The loss in GDP, quite frankly, due to excluding those who are formerly incarcerated, who are seeking jobs from the workplace. That's a lot of revenue from our GDP, and that cascades down to local communities. So it's a win-win for employers, for communities, for individuals, for our whole society.
Absolutely.
You talk about ban the box, but what are some of the other barriers? Is it in as much as just the stigma of having been formerly incarcerated? What are some of the other barriers to entry that you see? Because I think we're all committed, not just for those who are formerly incarcerated. We have to invest in skills and job training. We get that, but what are some of the other barriers to entry to get these folks not only in jobs but to retain and sustain them in meaningful employment?
Absolutely. Certainly there's a stigma. I believe that we lack in general in this country, in the social media age, with all the stories that are out there. You can listen to anyone's story online. Somehow we're not absorbing them. We're not understanding the empathy. There's an empathy gap right now with folks coming home, telling their stories, and then us being able to listen to them. So I do think that sharing our stories to get rid of the stigma is critically important. As many folks that have come home, I've been encouraged by what's possible, by not just the major success stories out there, but even the small success stories, just being able to find your way into any job and bring back to your family that you've been absent from so long. Those are hero stories. Those are true hero journeys and stories that we need to tell. But the barrier isn't just the stigma, which there is some. Companies aren't really set up, and this is with all different areas of diversity, to support diverse voices. And so some of those policies with your DEI consultants and trainers will tell you, some obvious ones, like, have you thought about childcare for new moms? There's a lot of things like that employers can do for formerly incarcerated individuals. I also was excited to see in the program that you're bringing on John V. F. Martin of Dave's Killer Bread, and they have really pioneered some of these ideas that you need to have for employers who are serious about second chance hiring. There's a lot of things you can do as a company. So yes, stories, stigma. I do think that companies can get involved in legislation as well. JP Morgan Chase was a great example, got behind some legislation. It used to be that if you were committed of certain types of crimes, you could not get into certain types of jobs. And they've been leading the way in the policy sector of trying to change some of those laws. Don't make a lot of sense. And yeah, I think a company has a role in spreading the word of what's been done and what's accomplished, really getting involved in job training and thinking about skills that you can offer right when folks come home, apprenticeships, training programs, and then getting involved with a more advanced cohort that can actually get people from right as they get home through employment is important. There's a lot of other barriers. Transportation and access from your home to a job is important. So seeing the remote work shift is actually really encouraging. Anyone on probation and parole, which is most people coming home, have a million hoops they have to jump through. Can they travel for these business meetings? Maybe not. So special accommodations for that are important. There are just a lot of things you learn once you commit to doing it. And if you're committed and you really get some great advice and support from folks that are experts in this area, there's a lot that can be done to slowly change the entire sector. I'm really excited to see some of these barriers getting removed.
Yeah, and when I attended your National Day of Empathy, and thank you so much. I think when you think about your core values and principles and guiding principles of your organization, you see words like servant leadership and soul. But the point there, it is about leading from a place of empathy, and I think we're seeing that that really is an important value for business leaders and leaders across our country and world to lead from. So we oftentimes say, well, how does that contribute to the bottom line? Well, it does, because it is a place is about the culture of an organization. I really appreciate how you valued that.
Yeah. And I just think, thank you for seeing that. I think it's a really important piece of the work that we do. And just personally, all of us have experienced that feeling of being left out or left behind and not included in the future, or being counted out, or, betted against. And it doesn't feel good. And that need to improve ourselves and constantly show up in a different way. And I think this works for a lot of folks that are underrepresented and minorities in this country. And then anyone with a stigma, like an arrest record. Anything we can do to empathize and understand. I mean, we have that. We've all gone through struggles like that. So I feel like that bridge to empathy isn't far away. We just need to remember that feeling in ourselves. We all have something, not that all suffering is the same, but we have all suffered. And so, yeah, that is kind of the soul that we like to bring to the work that we do. And hopefully anyone that works with us feels some of that too. I like to think that they do.
Yeah, one of the things also is that there's a lot of data that supports the case for second chance, and I would even argue third chance. I mean, we all have had multiple chances if we're just honest with our own assessments of our lives and careers. But I saw some interesting data. I believe it was from the Society for Human Resource Management that showed that folks who have been formerly incarcerated, returning citizens, data that they're more loyal on the job, more motivated, and they perform same or exceed the performance of others. And also there's lower turnover rates. I thought that was interesting because whatever perceptions we have in terms of stigma, that these are high performing employees of organizations and companies. Have you seen that type of data as well?
Absolutely. I've seen that data, and I think John Viev and Amanda, who are talking later, can speak quite specifically to some of those stories. I mean, I have Gen Z children. I can tell you that their work ethic is not quite the same as my generation, but I think you see some of these things across the board. When I was a new mom and I had my first job after my maternity leave, I realized all the other new moms worked 100 times more because we know what we're trying to prove. We have a limited amount of time. We're going to give it our all in that time that we have. When you don't take for granted the opportunities you're given, you crush them. At least that's been my experience. So I can tell you anecdotally, what you see coming out of our justice program, which is almost entirely run by formerly incarcerated individuals, you don't just see them outperforming their size because we have a small team that's been able to pass giant pieces of legislation. They outperform their size. I also think their heart is bigger than any other heart out there. And I'm really proud of what they've accomplished. And I think a lot of it has to do with that. So I can tell you anecdotally, even though I don't have the numbers in front of me. I agree.
Well, we trust your anecdotal take on this. Our audience today, I mean, the U.S. Chamber, we represent business of all sector sizes, regions, large, small, and medium across the country. And as we talk to businesses, particularly those small business and medium-sized businesses, how can they get involved and support second chance hiring? We talked about the JP Morgans. I know that in the Second Chance Business Coalition, you have major Fortune 500 companies. But is there a role for small businesses as well when it comes to this important work?
Absolutely. I think share the stories of the people that you have employed already, because I'm sure they're there. Making it a safe space to share it and encourage it and celebrate it, I think is important. I do think small companies can get involved in legislation or can do their own policy making, get rid of some of the requirements that don't make sense for that job. Like we see a lot of companies that still have, you must have a college education or X degree. And is that really necessary for that job role? So I'd say internally changing the policies and reach out. I think there are a lot of us that want to help and want to be in partnership with your company. Dreamcore included, Dave's Killer Bread Foundation, I think is another one, that we're here, we have the experience, and we know that partnering together will make us all stronger and make the country stronger. And so we are very interested in helping build that power with you.
Yeah, and another part to this work, and it's sad but true. I mean, you think about the disproportionate number of persons of color who have been historically incarcerated. It's not just about an opportunity to give a footing to by providing jobs to the formerly incarcerated, but arguably, this helps us address some of the other diversity challenges in our workforce across America. Would that be an accurate statement?
Absolutely. And a lot of companies I do know want to diversify. The numbers don't reflect the desire. And so if the desire is there, I think there are a lot of places out there, including Dreamcore, that want to help and not shame or blame. But in order to do that, you got to reach out first and ask for the help, which I know sometimes is hard in this divided times. But having a more diverse workforce makes a company stronger. And we've seen it over and over again. You just kind of have to get there, make that first step.
You bet. Well, I say all the time, Nisha, that we know it's the right thing to do. The moral imperative for second chance hiring, for diversity and equity and inclusion. The data is clear, and we understand the moral imperative. But there is truly, as we talked about, a business and economic case. So, if you, in our last minute or so, but I do want to come back to you with probably the most difficult question that anyone's ever asked you. I'm gonna hold that for last. But what would be your call to action right now? I mean, you're talking to America, you're talking to particularly the business community across our country. Any final parting words as a call to action?
Reach out for help. And for all of us, and this includes for the things that we know, I think we have to be open to sharing that information. The thing sticking with me, I want to have a great soundbite for you, but really what's present for me today is nuance. Mm-hmm. Understanding that there's nuance and that we are in a very complicated time and we need all of us together to work at solving the problems from several different angles. It is a complicated puzzle piece, this country we're trying to build, this world we're trying to build. And I do believe each one of us has that puzzle piece. So my call to action would be put it out there. I've got jobs. I want to hire people. I do not know where to find the people I'm looking for. I do not know how to build the type of company I want to build to make this an inclusive company for those folks. I don't know how to make them thrive. That is a daring thing to say. And then for us, that are in the nonprofit world or the social justice world, to say, we have some ideas. We can help. We actually know where to find folks. I think sometimes recruiting is the number one problem. And we're going to do it with loving kindness and a helpful hand so that we can get stronger. Y'all can get stronger. The country can get stronger. So I guess that's my call to action is let's make it okay. Let's give each other permission to reach out and name our blind spots and help each other.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your servant leadership. And here is that most difficult question I promised you that you've never gotten before. But you got to keep just a one word answer, very simple. Tell us something you do for fun with all of the work that you do. And this is hard work. Yeah. But what do you do for fun?
Well, I'm a 45-year-old woman who still plays soccer. I'm on a competitive soccer team. I still play every Sunday. I'm getting slower. Injuries are taking longer to recover from, but it is still something I do for fun.
I love it. Nisha Anand, CEO of Dreamcore, thank you so much for being with us. Hope you'll give our regards to the entire Dreamcore team. Yes. For not only closing prison doors, but opening doors of opportunity. And I will say also helping to create pathways for every American to realize their own American dream. Yes. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rick, for having me.
Well, thank you, Rick and Nisha, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this important conversation. I'm Jenna Schroe, Senior Director of Strategic Advocacy here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. As we heard, connecting returning citizens with employment is critical, providing a secure income, stability, and a connection with other members of society. But second chance hiring opportunities not only offer benefits to individuals and their communities, they also serve as a critical pillar for growing our workforce. Today, I am honored to be joined by Beth Davison, Senior Vice President of the Kentucky Chamber Foundation, and Amanda Hall, Campaign Director at Dreamcore Justice, who will both share their insights and experience on what an effective partnership on this issue can look like, helping remove some of the barriers that Nisha and Rick mentioned, and enabling more Americans to seek and successfully attain employment. Beth, let's start with you. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your partnership with Dreamcore and what that looks like in Kentucky?
Absolutely. Well, in Kentucky, you can't talk about criminal justice reform without saying Amanda Hall's name. I will start there. She has been a fierce advocate in Kentucky for CJ reform and, building people up and cutting down those ties to prison and getting the doors. So it was not a surprise when she went to go work for Dreamcorp and now has a wonderful national role with this great organization. And Dreamcorp is so much like the Kentucky Chamber, and that we want people out of prison and we want them in the workforce. And everything we do at the Kentucky Chamber Foundation, we do with meaningful, critical partnerships. Being the state's largest business association, for us, it's so much about workforce. Kentucky is plagued with one of the lowest workforce participation rates in the country. And when we really look at some of the root causes of that, we have way too many people in prison for low-level nonviolent crimes that stem from substance use disorders and not in the workforce. And when it's time for them to come out, the business community hasn't traditionally done the best job of opening the doors. As Nisha just kind of pointed out, there needs to be a lot of hand-holding. And so the Kentucky Chamber Foundation has, opened up several different programs in partnership with our Criminal Justice Cabinet and Office of Drug Control Policy, with their support and the support of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and the Just Trust. And through these partnerships and with people like Amanda at the table, we've been able in the last 2 years to recruit 50,000 fair chance jobs in the state of Kentucky, and really looking at barriers. And I can think specifically to one of the projects Amanda and I have worked pretty closely on together, which was our ID initiative. In the height of the pandemic, we saw a lot of early releases, and that kind of gave the chamber and our partners, really the bandwidth to say, like, how do we get these people then in the workforce and keep them out? And so we did this Fair Chance campaign, and we saw thousands and thousands of employers open their doors and we're ready. Let's hire and start to do the right thing. And then they started, what we saw is our returning citizens were showing up to interviews with pictures of their mugshots as that form of identification when they're filling out new hire paperwork. And I remember calling Amanda or being on a reentry call and saying, what's going on? We got employers to open their doors. Why would anyone show up with a picture of their mugshot as a form of ID? And we were so thankful to Amanda and our partners, because it was very quickly, they're like, that's how it is. That's what you have when you come out of prison. You only have that picture of a mugshot as that form of ID to get healthcare or housing or a job or anything that is so just a basic human right and need. And so I know Amanda and I and many of our other partners in the state worked really hard on, kind of working to remove that barrier of gaining an ID. I know we've worked really hard to get it pushed within our state budget. It's not there yet, but it will happen one day. But we have ran a pilot initiative with all state prisons where now we've raised the funds, again, through the support of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, to help pay for IDs. ACLUs help contribute to this as well. And what we're tracking now is if someone is access to an ID and access to a job. And we're going to study that for the next couple of years to see, is that return on investment for the state there, that they should actually be issuing these IDs across the state. So for us, it's really so much about workforce and doing the right thing. So not only is it the right thing ethically, but it's also the smart thing for a state to really take on, as Rick and Nisha really so well hit on.
That's wonderful. And, I know there's this programmatic element, but there's also a policy element. So Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about the advocacy component and what types of legislation you are tracking? I know Nisha alluded to some of the federal level happenings, but what's happening at the state level?
Yeah, and as everyone can probably tell now from Beth Davison, the Kentucky Chamber is such an amazing partner in this space. I just can't emphasize that enough. So for years now, I've been able to work with the chamber, and we know that employment is such a driver of also reducing recidivism and making sure that not only folks come home, but they stay home. So one of the big initiatives that we've worked on with the Chamber, along with other partners, is expungement. So we have been able to pass, 3 different expungement bills to date in Kentucky. So an expungement is just the ability to actually remove that conviction from your record, which opens up those doors to better employment, to higher education, housing. So these bills, working with the Chamber and a broader coalition that includes youth advocacy groups and faith leaders, we've been able to work in our state government to really push those bills over the finish line. And we continue to look at other legislation to help with reentry, to strengthen our workforce here. Beth was really instrumental in her team on passing a great bill about recovery through employment. To not only when you hire folks, but to make sure that they're supported within that job while they're your employee, to really retain, because that's another big issue. So we continue to work on expanding education here in the state of Kentucky for folks that are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. Another big win that we had in partnership with the Chamber, and I think that's something to emphasize too, that these partnerships, they do result in so many wins. I'm a formerly incarcerated Kentuckian, and I never knew that I would have the opportunity to change policy, to change the trajectory of our state, and to do it with such great partners. But our win from last year allowed work certification for folks that are incarcerated. So they have that certification. When they get out, they can have that job. And it even has language around protecting employers and some liability language. So it really was a holistic bill that could not have happened without the Chamber. So those are some of the current ones, that we've been working on here in Kentucky.
That's awesome. And oftentimes folks coming out of the prison system may have entered early, don't have any sort of educational background, don't have any tangible skills, and making sure that they're set up for success upon release is very important. I think Nisha mentioned things like ban the box, and there are several states that are looking at those types of laws. What is Kentucky doing around ban the box, or anything related to? We know occupational licensing has a huge influence on this segment of the population. What are you seeing in Kentucky around that, Amanda?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of years ago, our governor, and it was something that we supported, actually banned the box through executive order on state jobs. That was a huge step forward. And what that does is really allow folks to get their foot in the door and to open up these new opportunities. So we hope that that continues to expand. I also get the opportunity of working in some other states where they're working on bills of that nature, and also partnering with the business community on some of them. And then occupational licensing. So it may be something that, the folks on this call probably know, but all the barriers that formerly incarcerated folks have to obtaining those occupational licenses. So there has been so many bills passed that actually prohibits folks with records from obtaining them. So I'm very proud to say a few years ago, again, in partnership with the Chamber, a broad coalition, the Pegasus Institute here in Kentucky, faith-based groups, a huge coalition, we were able to pass a bill to strip away some of those barriers so more folks can obtain those licenses and step into those careers, those jobs, and to broaden and better the Kentucky economy and, most importantly, Kentucky lives. So that was some other good news out of Kentucky.
That's wonderful. And I have one more question, but I wanted to note that folks who want to ask questions from the audience, please feel free to drop them into Slido, and I'll ask those in a minute. But Beth, beyond opening their doors and advocacy, what are other things businesses can consider doing in this space?
Well, one of the things we really want to see in Kentucky is not just opening your door to hiring for our returning citizens, but how do you really capitalize on our returning citizens and educating and upskilling? The rate of change that we see technology disrupting workforce is coming at us so quickly. And what that means is we're going to need higher levels of skill, higher levels of education within our workforce. And so this population that's returning to us needs to be upskilled. We have to get them trained, just not for the jobs we have today, but also in tomorrow. And so what we really think about is how do you educate and upskill our returning citizens for pathways that matter. And so in Kentucky, we're working very closely with our Department of Corrections. And this is actually a nice tie to the U.S. Chamber Foundation's Talent Pipeline Management Program. Kentucky is a big TPM, Talent Pipeline Management state. We use that program a lot. And we're using it right now to start an initiative, a pipeline out of prison program, where we're working with employer groups by sector, really honing in on those key critical jobs that their businesses cannot operate without, and then working within the prison system to train up, to skill up, to educate up, get the training, get the education done that we can get done while they're serving their time. So by the time that they get out, they're going into a job. They're going into a position that requires some skill and education. Something we desperately need in Kentucky is that upskilling and higher levels of certification, degree attainment that comes with a lot of these positions that are so needed in our economy. We are working really hard right now. We've launched our first, what we're calling our Fair Chance Academy in Kentucky, because we don't say second chance, we actually say fair chance. And I really appreciated that Rick and Nisha brought this up, that sometimes people need a second or third or fourth chance. And so what we like to call this is fair chance hiring. And so in the Fair Chance Academy, we are selecting employers that are ready to get to work on opening their doors, but training them and giving them the resources and the tools that they need to open their doors and understand how you work with this population. I know some of the statistics got brought up about how productive our returning citizens really can be. The National Safety Council has some great data. They are shown to be more loyal, more productive, and they miss fewer days of work because they are committed to that job. At the Kentucky Chamber Foundation, what we've done with partners like Amanda is form a task force that is led by businesses as well as leaders from the recovery industry, Department of Corrections, that come together and drive and lead this work. I can't tell you how many lessons we've learned along the way from leaders just like Amanda that have said, no, you can't do it that way because we're coming at it from a business lens, but you have got to have the whole other piece of it. Kind of like when we launched the Fair Chance Jobs campaign and didn't realize that individuals would show up with a picture of their mugshot as that form of identification. We wouldn't have gotten that education if we weren't on reentry calls with Amanda at that time. So I think, there's so much employers can do. You're seeing a lot of investment in this space come from the corporate citizenship of great companies in Kentucky like Brown-Forman, Fifth Third. Both together, Brown-Forman yesterday announced $50 million investment to the West Louisville neighborhood. A couple months ago, Fifth Third announced $20 million investment. These are areas that have not been taken care of. This is where Breonna Taylor murder happened. And so you're seeing a lot of corporate investment. You're seeing a lot of businesses opening their doors, but not just opening their doors, really starting to upskill, train, and educate on careers that really, really matter.
That's great. And I love the distinction you made between second chance and fair chance hiring, because as one of my colleagues made the point the other day, some people didn't even have a first chance.
That's
so
right.
Fair to say second chance hiring. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. The first one I'm going to throw both of your way is speakers have discussed the barriers in second chance hires transportation, childcare. Are there any unique things employers are doing to address these issues that you can share or have worked in your communities?
Well, I'll kind of briefly take that one. We just worked in the legislature to pass a child care bill in Kentucky that will give employers with the state government a match program. So employers could say per employee offer $500 stipend for childcare. The state government would then come in and match that, giving that employee, say, $1,000 for childcare reimbursement. And Jen, I think you mentioned this earlier, or maybe it was Nisha that said, those first-time moms that now all of a sudden are out, they need access to childcare. I think there's a lot the business community can do around childcare support for employees that are returning or are single parents, period. So that's something I think we're very excited to take advantage of, that new piece of legislation that is funded. It went in, I think, a $15 million line item for this pilot effort. And then we'll be able to build upon that after this first year.
Yeah, and something when it comes to transportation, that actually Goodwill, who's a big partner with the chamber and works on a lot of fair chance hiring, actually has a program to help folks who are in recovery or formerly incarcerated or that just need transportation to get a car at very low cost to set up efficient, effective, easy to pay payments. So really, especially for our rural communities, that is such a big deal and issue. And so many reentry orgs and different businesses will help with bus passes in the urban areas. But that's definitely something we can continue to scale up because it is a huge barrier for folks.
Wonderful advice. Thank you. We'll close it out with this question, throwing it to both of you. What advice do you have for those who are seeking employment after prison? So not from the employer perspective, but the actual job seeker perspective. Amanda, maybe we start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. If there is a reentry organization nearby that person, to make sure to go there. There's also some great online portals in different states, or even, Honest Jobs will have jobs on there more nationally that do fair chance hiring. Sometimes even if it's a parole or probation officer that's very invested in their caseload, they will also have a list of jobs that will hire folks with a conviction on their record. Because often when folks first come out, I remember myself, the stigma and what I was going through, I was very intimidated to apply for some jobs because I just knew I would see that box that said, have you ever been convicted of a felony? So actually having that list at the beginning to let you know that they hire is so important. And just like Beth mentioned, to have that paperwork, to have IDs, things of that nature, and often reentry organizations or your parole or probation officer will help with those things. It's much better when you have a program like the Chamber has helped implement, though.
Certainly. Beth, any advice?
I would only support what Amanda said. Get resources, get help. If any of you on the call have either been in prison or had the chance to go through a reentry simulator, you will know it's near impossible to stay out of prison. Those barriers can almost be insurmountable. And so the services through the reentry support services that are out there, please get them. If you are in Kentucky, please come back to work. We want you. We have got under Kentucky's Talent Hub system on our website, we celebrate employers that are fair chance employers, and we designate them with a sticker. That website is completely free. It's on the Kentucky Comeback website, and it's searchable by a fair chance job. So we want you in Kentucky. We want you working. Please look up those jobs and get back to work and get the resources and the help that you so need and so deserve to help wrap around you as you start to reenter.
Well, Beth and Amanda, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing some of your very important insights and tangible takeaways for driving meaningful progress in second chance hiring and opportunities for returning citizens. Over to my colleague, Latricia.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you to Beth and Amanda. I think there were such great insights from that last panel. As Jenna mentioned, I'm Latricia Boone. I am Vice President of the Equality of Opportunity Initiative here at the U.S. Chamber, and I know my colleague Rick Wade talked a little bit about our work around equality, so I won't go deep there. And I'm just really excited about the panel that we're going to have now and the opportunity to really dig in deeper as we talk about our commitment to supporting businesses who are interested in adopting and advancing second and fair chance hiring practices. We just heard from the Kentucky Chamber and Dreamcore about what state and local communities are doing, or an example of a state and local community that's doing this work, and how they're advocating for stronger policies to reduce barriers for formerly incarcerated individuals to be able to return to the workforce and embrace the opportunity to participate fully in the economy. And now we're going to shift a little bit to talk to a panel that's going to share insights on how businesses, through strong community partnerships, can implement those fair hiring practices. I'd like to invite our panelists in to be able to introduce themselves and their work in this space. And so I'm going to start by asking Dr. Alyssa Lovegrove to introduce herself.
Thank you, Latricia. I'm very pleased to be here. My name is Alyssa Lovegrove. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship at the business school at Georgetown University, and I am also the academic director of a program we launched 4 years ago, the Georgetown University Pivot Program. It's a certificate in business and entrepreneurship delivered by Georgetown in partnership with the DC Department of Employment Services, and it's designed specifically for returning citizens.
Thank you, Alyssa. Latasha Moore. I'm going to invite Latasha to introduce herself.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Latasha Moore, and I'm the program coordinator for the Georgetown University Pivot Program.
Thank you, Latasha. And our last panelist, Genevieve Martin. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Genevieve Martin. I'm the executive director at the Dave's Killer Bread Foundation. For those of you that are familiar with the brand, we are the #1 selling sliced organic bread across the country. And in 2015, we started a foundation specifically to equip employers across the country to hire the best person for the job, regardless of their conviction history.
Thank you. So I am going to jump right in, so in the essence of time, and actually start with a question to you, Latasha. One is someone who's been working through the Georgetown Pivot Program and has seen this work in many different ways, but also who's someone who graduated from the Georgetown Pivot Program. Can you share or just talk about what would you say are some of the barriers to entry that justice impacted individuals face as they are working to enter or re-enter the workforce? I know we've heard a little bit of that in our previous panels, but I think the experience that you're seeing is also important for this conversation.
Sure. So some of the barriers that justice impacted individuals face as they working to enter or re-enter the workforce are not having IDs, not having stable housing. They have mental health issues, lack of resources. They experience lack of family and community support, transportation issues, not being able to meet education requirements for jobs that can provide financial stability.
Yep. Thank you for that. And I think, again, we heard some of that, but clearly we're seeing that across the board in communities across the country. And as I'm throwing out this next question, I'm going to ask, Alyssa, if you could talk a little bit about the Georgetown Pivot Program and share more about it, but also how the program itself is helping to address and help folks overcome some of those barriers.
Sure. Yeah. So Latasha very well articulated what some of those challenges are that returning citizens face when they're coming back into the community and seeking employment. And, I think it's worth underscoring, we're not just talking about finding jobs. We're talking about finding sustainable living wage employment. And so with that backdrop, we created the Pivot Program. It's really it's really a cross between an academic program and a transitional employment program, and it's modeled after many of our other mid-career professional development programs. Our goals are both to allow individuals who participate in the program to access career opportunities that might have otherwise been out of reach, and also to give employers who are interested in second chance hiring a way to enter this space and to learn what they need to do in order to tap into this often overlooked source of talent. It's kind of an unusual program for a university. It's unusual for a university to be a service provider, but it gives us the chance to see and experience the issues through the eyes of both our participants and our employer partners. And in turn, that informs our ability to be thought leaders. So I think, to answer your question, I think the way that we are helping to break down the barriers, the principal way is by helping employers start to look beyond the labels and see candidates as individuals, as people with their own strengths and talents. They know that we work as part of our program. The first part is entirely academic, but the second part is internship based. We work very closely with employer partners here in DC, and many of our fellows, our participants are called fellows. Many of our fellows are then offered permanent employment at those companies. And then by working through that hiring process, employers can start to see what are some of the obstacles that might prevent someone from making it successfully through the hiring process. And we can work with them to figure out, well, what are the ways that you can overcome this, not just in this situation, but on a broader scale, so that you can really start to think about employing other individuals who may have a criminal conviction in their past.
Absolutely. And I want to bring Genevieve into this conversation because clearly Dave's Killer Bread is known as a pioneer in many ways in this space and is doing work, but I'd love to hear more about how you all have integrated second chance and fair chance hiring into your workforce strategy, and maybe even offer some thoughts to employers out there who are trying to figure out, how do I do this? Where do I go? What steps do I need to take?
So this began for us out of a necessity. So our business was growing so quickly that we sometimes needed to hire people within 36 hours of getting a really big order, and we needed to be able to produce the product, package it, and distribute it. So at that time, this was over a decade ago, we said, who are our top performers and how do we hire more of them very quickly? And we found that in most cases, our top performers had all experienced incarceration. Not in every scenario, but in many. And what we found is that these were the folks that were willing and able to come to work early, that would problem solve, that would be extremely resilient and loyal on the job. And so we said, okay, something's working. Let's keep doing it and do more of it. We made a number of mistakes. So we figured out things not to do and what to do. And we realized that we had vendors, suppliers, peers, competitors coming to us saying, how do you run your talent acquisition strategy? Why are you so great in your bakery? And we'd kind of taken it for granted. And we said, well, clearly we've stumbled across something really special here. Let's figure it out. And then let's figure out how to tell people how to do this better. So we made it our business to figure out what worked, to find other companies across the country that were also pioneering this work, to see what's working for you. Have we had the same experiences? How do we teach people to do more? What we found is that in most cases, an employer needs to just tinker with their existing strategies and policies. Very rarely does any organization need to overhaul everything, hire new people, and restructure their human resource departments. It's usually looking at, what are our policies and practices? How do we recruit? What are our pipelines for talent? Have we really opened up to the community what we're about, what type of environment and job and wages and benefits are offered? And then have we removed barriers that we've put up inside of our organization to let these incredibly talented people through? So when we think about second chance employment, we're referring almost not at all to the candidate and entirely on the employer to say, hey, here's your second chance to get the best talent. What are the things that we need to tweak to recenter? And usually that comes down to, where are you recruiting people from? Have you trained people internally to know how to talk about this work, why it's a critical part of your talent acquisition strategy, and why it makes sense for your company? And then third, most organizations do criminal background checks. Over 85% of employers do them. So just accepting that as a truth, how do we run background checks, as we do at our company, and still hire the best person for the job? Just because something comes up on a background check doesn't mean an automatic no. It means there's additional consideration, and we teach employers how to do that. all of the time. So how do you build an individualized assessment for each candidate so that you're getting to a yes? Because when you're doing that individualized assessment, you've already interviewed them. You've already decided this is a person you want to hire. You've just learned new information and you need to know what to do with it. And most people don't know what to do with that. So it's really re-socializing how we do this, understanding the talking points, understanding how employers have a role to play in community shared safety. Traditionally, we hear people talk about public safety being so important and critical, but we tend to leave that on law enforcement, government agencies. It's public safety. They'll figure it out. But when we reframe that to shared safety and realize that all of us have a role to play within the community, it's really easy to cast the role for employers to say economic mobility for all community members. What does that look like in your organization? And how are you getting to the most talent possible rather than filtering out, whether purposefully or not, incredibly talented people that are going to lend themselves to your company incredibly well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that was a great way to frame and help us understand especially from the employer perspective, as we have, businesses and companies as a part of this call who are doing this work, and even bringing that back to maybe a real world example. Latasha, I'd love maybe if you can even share, whether it, again, be from own experience or folks that you have worked with and supported through the Pivot program, where have you seen, and you don't have to go into every detail, but where have you seen maybe this show up for someone who's been justice impacted or who are reentering the workforce? How have you seen a company support them, and how has that helped them to be able to attain or retain an opportunity as a result?
So I've seen companies provide support, providing mentoring and coaching, cost training, providing transportation assistance, tuition assistance, and investing in professional development. And some companies even go as far as holding weekly meetings with the returning citizens to see how they're progressing and just investing in their overall growth in the company.
Yeah. And what has that meant, on a personal level to someone who's experiencing that with a company?
It definitely shows that they're invested and they're in it for the long haul to make sure that the returning citizen has success. So keeping that open dialogue and conversation going to see how can they support and be supportive of the growth of that individual.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to just build on that a little bit more too, because I know, Alyssa, you all have been doing this work for some time. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, any lessons learned in this.
Sure. I think probably the most important lesson learned is that if you think about it, there are two sides to this challenge. There's both creating a more welcoming employment environment, and the other side is producing more job-ready candidates. And I think the thing we've learned is that business owners and employers have an important role to play in both of those things. There is a growing awareness of the need to revisit hiring practices, and Genevieve, spoke to that a moment ago. But we also need employers to engage in a very intentional way in developing the talent pipeline. Community partners can help with the job search. They can address a lot of the other needs that an individual might have that might interfere with their ability to perform in a job. But they don't really know what skills are required, especially as Beth mentioned this a moment ago, when we talk about the need for upskilling. A workforce agency isn't going to know what those skills are and isn't going to be equipped to train in those skills. So we need employers to support that developmental stage. We also need to create many more earn and learn type employment opportunities. Nobody coming out of a program 3, 6, 9 months later is going to have that higher level skill. But people need jobs. They need stable income. They need access to all the other benefits you get when you are employed. So we need to create new models of employment, and this is something else employers can do. And new models where people can be employed as they develop those skills and get to have access to those higher paid, higher skilled job opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. We've come so close to the end of our time, which happened so quickly. I feel like we really could dig so much deeper. So I'm hoping we have an opportunity to really bring this conversation back and go a little bit deeper. But as we close out, and I will throw this to all of our panelists and feel free to jump in here, would love to hear from you. One, just reiterating again the importance of partnerships for the business community, community partners, and others, and also centering the experiences of those who have been justice impacted. And then maybe any action step you might recommend for those tuning in today, particularly companies who are thinking about this or already utilizing this as a hiring strategy.
Well, I'll hop in real quick. I'd say both the most important lesson we've learned in working with employers, as well as the call to action, would be education, right? Whenever we're going to do something new, we tend to research things. We need checklists. We want to understand what to do, how to do it, who to talk to. We need some sort of coach or guide. And that's what we learned many years ago, is it wasn't enough to say, hey, employers, this is really important. It's really powerful. It's really practical. Do it. What we found is whenever we said that, dozens and dozens of employers would call us and say, okay, great. How? What do I do? How do I get my team member on board? So we made it our business to build a program for employers, to be honest with you. So it breaks down into a syllabus. What are the things you need to understand that are foundational about employment, and making sure that you have made nuances and shifts that are going to include people with conviction histories in your organization. So that's the big one. Inform yourself, educate yourself. Ignorance isn't bliss in this particular scenario. Secondarily, it's really practical. This works. So you won't be the first, second, or third organization to try this. Hundreds of employers across the country do this work really, really well, and we know that it gets good results. I'll stop there. I know we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. I want to quickly open it up to Alyssa.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on what Genevieve said. Notwithstanding all of those things, my advice is just try it. Try hiring one person. It is going to be difficult. It is going to raise a bunch of issues that you need to work through, but but they're all surmountable. And as you look at one candidate, one person, you start to see the way they can add value to your company. It's just not that scary. And you build from there.
Yep. Latasha, anything you want to add to that?
I agree with everything. I definitely encourage in companies to get more involved with second chance hiring. Returning citizens are dedicated, they're loyal, they will add value to the company because it's a win-win for both the employer and the employee, and as well as the community.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was a great way to sum up this panel and this conversation today. And thank you all for joining us. And I want to thank our audience for taking time to be part of this conversation. I just want to say that, at the Chamber, we are very much committed to this work. And if you want to learn more, visit uschamber.com to find out more about our Equality of Opportunity Initiative and how you can partner with us to engage the U.S. Chamber as we work to build an inclusive economy and realize true progress for the business community and our nation as a whole. So thank you.